The purpose of this video is to explain why Australia is wider on a North Polar azimuthal equidistant projection map. So this is a North Polar azimuthal equidistant projection map. For the sake of brevity, at this point forward, I'll just refer to it as an azimuthal map. You will notice that Australia is clearly wider than the United States. The width of the United States is about 2,800 miles. The width of Australia is about 2,500 miles. So the United States is wider than Australia. However, as I pointed out, Australia is wider than the United States. People who know that the Earth is flat generally regard this as the flat Earth model. But if this is the case, then why is there this disparity or discrepancy? In addition to this azimuthal map does have practical value. So looking at this government website, we read, the azimuthal equidistant projection is used for radio and seismic work, as every place in the world will be shown as its true distance and direction from the point of tangency. So here's what we have. Empirical evidence indicates that the Earth is flat. The azimuthal map appears to be the flat Earth map. The azimuthal map is functional and has practical value. However, the United States is wider than Australia, but on the azimuthal map, Australia is almost twice as wide as the United States. So if the Earth is flat, and if the outlay is, for the most part, the North Polar azimuthal equidistant projection map, then why would there be this distortion? So the deceivers are going to say they took a globe, they drew lines of longitude and latitude on the globe, and then they took that and projected that onto a flat surface. And as shown in this Flat Earth debunking website right here, it says, since it is impossible to spread the surface of a globe on a flat surface without distortion, all maps are distorted in some respects. Here's what actually happened. They took a flat Earth, they projected that onto a globe, they then drew lines of longitude and latitude, and then they took that and projected that back onto a flat Earth. And because these coordinates must be consistent between the globe of Earth in terms of geographic regions and cities and all that, it forces the distortion. So these lines of longitude and latitude force the distortion when projected back onto the flat Earth map. So here is the primary source of the distortion. So the major source of the distortion. So this is the ball Earth, and you will notice, okay, this is the equator, and moving from the equator north, lines of longitude converge on the north to the North Pole. And also you'll notice that the circumference of the circles of latitude decrease as one moves from the equator north. So the circumference of this circle of latitude is greater than this one's greater than this one. And this is also true on the flat Earth map. So the equator, moving to the center of the Earth, lines of longitude converge, and circles of latitude get progressively smaller. However, when moving from the equator south on a globe, the lines of longitude converge on the alleged South Pole, and the circumference of the circles of latitude decrease as one moves from the equator south. And the opposite phenomena occurs on the flat Earth map, or the azimuthal map. So you'll notice from the equator south, instead of converging, the lines of longitude diverge, and also the circumference of the circles of latitude increase as one moves from the equator south. So what I did, so this is obviously the opposite phenomena from between the globe and the flat earth, which is creating major distortion south of the equator. Okay, so what I did is I took Australia and the United States in Google Earth. I measured the height and width of each in miles, and then I took the height and width in pixels. So I took the photos and I put them in Photoshop, and I measured the height and width in pixels. So for instance, the height of the United States in pixels is 335. So I did that. I did the same thing with the azimuthal map. And as far as height is concerned, United States is about 1584 divided by 1988 is 0.797. The height on the globe in pixels, 335 divided by 411, 0.815. About the same. Height on the azimuth in pixels, 251 divided by 304 is about 0.826. So all these are about the same, so proportional height. However, when one compares the width, you see what I pointed out earlier. So the width of the United States, 2811 divided by 2479 is 1.13. The width on the globe in pixels, 567 divided by 501, 1.13, about the same. However, the width on azimuth in pixels, 486 divided by 877, 0.554. And obviously, that is pretty apparent. So then I went forward and I added additional countries. So I added Greenland, did the same thing with Greenland, did the same thing with Venezuela, did the same thing with Bolivia. And you'll notice Greenland is north of the United States. The United States is north of Venezuela. Venezuela is north of Bolivia. And the southernmost is Australia. And here's what I found. So here's the height in miles of Greenland. So for instance, Greenland. Height in miles, width in miles. Height divided by width is 1.9. Height on the globe in pixels. Width in pixels is height divided by width is 1.857. So this number divided by this number is about 1. And I did that for every country. So what this is saying is that the globe proportions are about correct. So this is most likely human error and all that. However, on the azimuth, when doing the same thing, Greenland, height, width, 1.9. Height in pixels on the azimuth, 258 divided by 138 gets 1.870. So this number divided by this number is 1.017. So you'll notice as moving from the north to the south, so Greenland's most north, then United States, Venezuela, Bolivia, and then Australia, you will notice that this number keeps increasing. And what this is telling you is that the width is disproportionately wider on the azimuthal map as one moves from north to south. You'll also notice that Venezuela on up is north of the equator, Bolivia down is south of the equator. So the point of Venezuela is to show that there is distortion north of the equator. However, that will be explained in a later video. So here are the findings. A north polar azimuthal equidistant projection map appears to be proportional from north to south. Lines of longitude appear to be correct. This will be explained in a later video. North of the equator, the azimuthal map is disproportional east to west, but not nearly as severely as south of the equator. And the distortion north of the equator will be explained in a later video. South of the equator, a north polar azimuthal equidistant projection map is distorted wider from east to west. When moving from the equator south, because the lines of longitude converge on a globe and diverge on an azimuthal map, and because the circumference of the circles of latitude decrease on a globe and increase on an azimuthal map, there is an increasingly wider east to west distortion on a north polar azimuthal equidistant projection map when moving from the equator south. And this is all intended to reinforce the globe-Earth lie in the mind of those who use the North Polar Azimuthal Equidistant Projection Map. So, in conclusion, the North Polar Azimuthal Equidistant Projection Map is distorted. So this is a conclusive explanation of the width of Australia relative to the United States on the azimuthal map. The North Polar Azimuthal Equidistant Projection Map is distorted. The distortion is not a result of a ball Earth being projected onto a flat surface. The distortion is a result of the flat Earth being projected onto a ball, lines of latitude and longitude being drawn on the ball, then the ball being projected back onto a flat surface. The lines of latitude and longitude must maintain their ball Earth coordinates on the North Polar Azimuthal Equidistant Projection Map in order for the map to have functional value, causing the distortion. The primary source of the distortion is from the lines of longitude converging on a globe while diverging on an azimuthal projection map, as well as the circumference of the circles of latitude decreasing on the globe versus circumference of the circles of latitude increasing on an azimuthal map when moving from the equator south. Because the Australia is south of the equator and because the United States is north of the equator, and due to the distortions of the North Polar Azimuthal Equidistant Projection Map, Australia appears wider than the United States when it is not.